Stranded: Alien Dawn is an early access planet survival sim which, like RimWorld, gives you the responsibility of taking a group of survivors from a crashed spaceship and helping them to survive the terrors of being stranded on an alien and at times very hostile world. Subsequently, the game can be pretty difficult, but with these tips, you should have a good start. First, we get to pick our initial 4 survivors. Pick them carefully. Relationships can cause problems. After all, a parent does not want to see their child die. Also, when picking, try to get a good spread of skills between the team. The triangle that you can see on the skill bar dictates the highest skill level that your team has in that bar. And the better your survivors are at a given skill, the more likely that they're going to be able to succeed at that given activity. For example, farmers that are level 3 or above have 0% chance for a crop planting failure for basic crops. We also have combat proficient members who are less likely to miss, and highly intelligent or intellectual members are going to be much better at research for you. You'll also notice that there may be traits that you're wanting to avoid, such as picking vegetarian survivors, as it may be difficult to feed them in the early game. Speaking of feeding though, emergency rations are incredibly helpful early game, but it's best to move on to other foods as soon as possible due to its long shelf life. And do note that you can cook these rations to give a boost to happiness if and when needed, but ideally you want to deny eating these when they're not being used for happiness or during an emergency. This can be done in the Survivor Restrictions tab, and you just need to click the box to deny it being consumed, and do this for each survivor. Just remember to permit people to eat them if you do run out of food. Of course, one great way to get food in if you need it is farming. Now, in order to farm, you do need to observe plants. This takes a bit of time, so I highly recommend observing only a couple of plants to start off with. Most notably, the grain crop is really good early, as it only takes 9 days from planting to harvest, and these can also be used for food in the early game, along with fermentation and basic antibiotics. You may also want to observe the cotton plant for clothing and the glowing mushrooms for healing balm as well. Of course, farming won't help you with food in the early game, as it takes a while for them to grow. So for this, you'll either want to hunt aliens, scavenge carcasses, or harvest plants that you see in the wild. Just make sure to observe them first so that you can plant them later, rather than having to run across the map just to observe one plant. Managing happiness, and more importantly avoiding breakdowns, will be super important in your playthrough. The blue bar that you can see behind a character's icon shows roughly how happy they are, and another thing that you can do is actually go across to each individual character and review their happiness, and from there you can actually see if there's anything that you can do immediately to increase their happiness. For example, building a table and chairs so that they can eat at a table and chairs, or build a house for shelter. Another thing that you should also bear in mind for happiness is observing other plants when you get a chance, as they may unlock new buildables for fun activities, such as the punching pole, which can be done from observing skim bark, or the shooting target, which is done with hay. Now, they're easy to build, and having this variety of activities will help keep your team happier for longer. Another way to ensure that you don't overwork your team is to schedule in some relaxation time for your team. Also, depending on your team members, they may prefer working at night. If this is the case, make sure to change their schedule accordingly. So go over to their schedule, and then you can tick time slots that you want them to relax, or to work, or to sleep. Also, you can arrange your schedule around so that if there are survivors who don't get on particularly well, won't spend that much time together. Definitely food for thought. Thankfully, from what I can see, we all start the game in spring. This gives us plenty of time to prepare for winter, but it is a bit of a ticking clock. When it comes to winter, you're going to want to ensure that your survivors have clothing, warmth, and a stable shelter for it. Winter also poses a big risk to food, so make sure that you have enough food stored, and in order to do that, you'll also want to get some research on the go as soon as possible. Now, research does take a long time to do, so it's best to have someone researching as much as possible, ideally all the time. As your survivors with the higher intellect research faster, make sure to prioritize those that have the higher intellect to do these tasks. You can do this by activating advanced priorities, and here you can prioritize tasks from 1 to 5, 1 being the highest priority and 5 being the lowest. When it comes to building, we get to choose from a selection of materials. Prioritize using materials that are nearby for your initial structure, as this will help ensure that the buildings get built as soon as possible, rather than you having to wait on resources. You should also make sure to choose what resources you're using for crafting. You don't want to be crafting bows out of synthetic fabrics unless you absolutely have to, as the resources are rare. And a bow, for example, can be made from cloth or fake leather pretty easily. Whilst talking about resources, they should also have a dedicated spot in your settlement to be stored. That way, your survivors won't hike a mile to collect the resources that they need in order to build anything. They just have to go to the center of the settlement. Along with the cold, hunger, and stress trying to kill your survivors, so will aliens occasionally. There is this kind of wave defense survival minigame that goes on with you being attacked by a horde of insects. But you can direct the path that they take to your base by leaving a gate open. They will go for the path of least resistance, so consider creating longer paths for them, maybe even a labyrinth for them to take to get into your main base. This will ensure you get plenty of shots off before they even get close to your survivors. Also, make sure your highest combat talented survivors have the best weapons. When it comes to weapons, you can make basic weapons with a little bit of research, but it can be very beneficial to scavenge each of the crash-landed spaceship parts. This is because it can give you some really high-level items, whether that's first aid kits, emergency rations, or clothing and weapons. And finally, from time to time, you may get access to a new survivor. Providing you have a good stock of resources, it's almost always more beneficial to take them on, unless of course you know that they won't get on with your current survivors. So, there you are guys, there are 13 tips, or actually over 13 tips, to give you the best start to Stranded Alien Dawn. So if you do want me to cover this more, or do have your own tips, let me know in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe if you do want to see more. Until next time, thank you so much to all of our amazing supporters, most notably our Soloxclipse patrons, Cerebral Tag, James Irwin and Firefless, as well as our Lunars, The Calamity, Dixie Chris, Ben and Star, as well as our Blood Moon of the Day, which today is Dashlom. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.